Today is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2000, and it's my pleasure to be here with Joe Livermore, who is the Dean of the University of Arizona College of Law from 1973 to 1977. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us why you wanted to be Dean at this law school?
There's really two questions. Why did I want to be a dean? And that's lost in the mists of memory. I think it's the conceit of the young that you can accomplish something. And at this law school, the reason was because after I came to interview, I was really excited by the young faculty that Charles Ayers had brought in. And I thought that the opportunity to move forward was greater here than many places.
Mm-hmm. How did you find the school in terms of assets when you arrived?
Well, you know this story. Charles left me $17 in the discretionary account. And that's not fair because there's also a lot of state support, and the state had been reasonably generous. Faculty salaries were competitive, but we were in a very cramped and unhealthy building. So in that sense, the primary focus of my years as dean was trying to get a new building.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about how that evolved.
We had a lot of people helping on that. We started the Law College Association dinner the first year I was here, and the first speaker was Burton Barr, who was the power in the legislature. And that was advertent. We were trying to convince people of the legislature of the need for a new building and to make them at least not enemies in that enterprise. We had the help of Jim Bush, Ted Thayer, Mike Hennigan, who were alums who were very instrumental in helping us persuade the legislature and the regents to keep the law school building as a top priority.
Mm-hmm. When you arrived as dean, were there any problems with the school that you felt needed to be addressed? In addition to the building, I guess.
The building was
That's
the big
an obvious one, right?
Another one was the writing program, and I don't know that you ever have that solved. There are a lot of grumping from senior members of the bar that our graduates couldn't write, but I remember when I was in law school there was grumping, and there still is.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to address that by creating the small section research and writing program. Probably about the second year of my deanship. I gather, I've been gone a while, but I gather that the small section has been remarkably successful. The writing program is being revised yet again to meet those who are presently grumping about the writing skills of our graduates.
What was your vision for the law school when you arrived as dean?
I had no vision. It was one day at a time. Try to turn out the best graduates we could for the practice of law.
Mm-hmm. What were some of your priorities?
And nothing more than that.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get good teachers, hire good faculty, get good courses, improve the writing program, turn out good graduates.
Well, those are the basics that most deans have listed. What were some of the high points for you during your tenure as dean?
Well, I suppose the high point is getting the appropriation for the building, and while that got us over a hurdle, one of the more satisfying enterprises was planning the building.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Arthur Andrews, I think, had constructed a report as to what was needed, and there wasn't much dispute about what was needed. But working with Terry Atkinson, who was the architect, was fun, and I think it turned out pretty well. It's lasted reasonably well, and it apparently is going to work with add-ons for a while longer.
Absolutely.
You were concerned too with architecture and how it was all the buildings related to each other. Can you go into more detail about that?
Well, some people don't like the classrooms. I've always liked them. I came from Minnesota, and we had huge classrooms that could seat 200 people, and it's a long ways back from the front to the people in back. With this facing one another, they can hear one another, and you don't feel as far removed from the students as I felt in that was one aspect of it. A second aspect was that I wanted to ensure that the area at class change was large enough to accommodate that change. If you were ever in the old building, you couldn't move when the classes came out. And the other thing involved in that was, let's put it outside so that we don't have to pay for the space of shuffling between classes. That, I think, has worked out really well, and that courtyard is a very pleasant space.
Were there any special challenges because of the times when you were dean, in terms of what was going on with the state or on a national level?
Really, no. I mean, people think that it was a difficult era, but it didn't turn out to be.
Oh, good. What do you think you would list among your achievements in terms of moving this law school forward?
Well, I'm not sure that there are many, but and none of them are individual, but the ones that stick out in my mind are the small section of research and writing and the building.
What was the relationship between the law school and the bar when you were dean?
I'm not sure that it's any different than it ever was. That once you're removed from legal education, you can view it with suspicion if you choose to, or you can be supportive if you choose to. We had plenty of graduates who were very supportive, and there were plenty who were, I'm sure, convinced that we were letting the whole enterprise down.
What type of student organizations existed at that time?
Not nearly as many. The ones that I remember was the Arizona Advocate. I think that sort of disappeared, but it was a very vigorous newspaper. It was winning awards all the time from the ABA as a top student newspaper. That's just gone by the board. And they were quite ready to criticize the administration. I thought it was healthy, wonderful organization. Beyond that, there was a student government that was helpful, and other organizations that weighed in as issues dictated, but not nearly as many, and probably not as vocal.
How did you raise funds for the law school at the time?
Badly. We tried all kinds of things without much success. And it was an era. I remember visiting at Stanford in 1969, and I think I have these figures right. Well, Stanford's a very prominent law school with very prominent graduates, many of whom were well-heeled. The year I was there was 69. They got $30,000 in receipts from fundraising. Fundraising was started when I was at the University of Minnesota, when they had never done it. So it was an early time, and people had not got in the habit, certainly not in the habit of contributing to public universities. And so it was a very difficult sell.
Sometimes it still is. What was your relationship like with the rest of the university administration?
I thought good. John Schaefer was president. He was supportive of the law school, but there were times when things didn't work out exactly right. But from the standpoint of the law school, I think we did fine.
Did you interact with the deans of the other colleges very often?
Rarely.
What was the relationship with this law school and ASU's brand new law school?
Well, these things come and go. It was fine. They were having a bad patch on the bar exam, and during the time I was dean, and so we had a committee together to try to persuade the bar examiners that their questions should be more academic and not just what happened in practice last week. I might add that 20 years or 15 years later, we had a bad patch, and I think ASU was supportive of the reform efforts that were again needed then. That kind of thing went on. We had a common interest in, I think, both of us in being as good as we could be and not undercutting one another.
Who was the dean of the law school at that time at ASU?
Pedrick.
Do you remember which faculty members might have been hired while you were dean?
Well, I do remember very few of them are here. Mary Doyle was the first woman who was hired my first year here, and then Tom Schuessler and Steve Phillips were always bees, but two of those have left teaching, and Roy's still here.
We just interviewed Stephen Phillips.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me how you came up with the idea of the small section concept.
That's the way it worked at the law school I went to. It seemed to me an attractive way to study, so.
It's very popular among our students still. You instituted the special writing seminars that you touched on. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, seminars were kind of a problem at the time that I came here, because they didn't have uniform requirements. Some of them had a paper, some didn't. A number of small writing assignments, and the faculty's concern was that there ought to be one substantial paper required for graduation, so that we came up with something called a starred seminar. That indicated that the paper required in that seminar would satisfy that graduation requirement. There could be other seminars with other requirements. Students were free to take them, we encouraged them, but they simply didn't satisfy the substantial writing requirement.
Can you tell me what you think the biggest change in legal education has been since you were dean?
I'm not sure about this. It seems to me that the biggest change would be that the focus of the faculty is less on the practice of law and more on the academic interests, often that they share with people in other disciplines in the university. And I think that's healthy. That law should be subjective. It is not simply the learning of the rules and the manipulation of the materials. It ought to relate to the real world, and that depends on research in other disciplines. So there's a lot more of that than when I first came here.
Where did most of the graduates go to practice when you were dean?
Well, I suppose most of them went to Phoenix and Tucson. I suppose they still do. But there were people who were going to Los Angeles and San Francisco and Washington. I'm sure there are more now than that era.
Were there any especially interesting or significant events that happened at the college when you were dean that kind of stands out in your memory? In what ways do you think legal education has suffered since you were dean?
I'm not sure that it has. I mean, everything is a balancing. You gain some things, you lose some things, and some things that are lost maybe shouldn't be lost, but a lot of the things that are gained are real gains.
Were there clinical programs when you were dean?
Practically none. What was there was largely eliminated, partly for funding reasons, but partly with a preference to use externships. And then as time went on, we got more of these in-house programs with Tom Hoey on skills. And it's only recently that we've gone back to more substantial clinical involvement.
If you could change one thing about legal education today, what would that be?
I have no
Stay the course. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
It was